The next definition in the series is closer reinforcement, and before we switch to the screen view, here are a couple of typical closer reinforcements. Flat plate that's going to be here, just literally a flat piece of steel that's going to be rectangular in shape. It's going to be a thickness appropriate to act as a reinforcement. And then you have this reinforcement. It is basically 2-in-1. It's this part, but it's also this part. This is just a flat reinforcement. This is what's known as a half sleeve. It kind of looks like half of the frame if you use your imagination and take a look at it that way. These are nice to use. These are more expensive to use. These are nice to use and they're less expensive to use. If you know where the door closer is going to be installed, or whatever hardware that you need to reinforce for, that a reinforcing plate applies, use the flat one. It's a lot less expensive. If you're not sure and you have to reinforce your headers for a closer, use the half sleeve, because this will allow you to install a closer in the three primary methods: parallel arm, top jam, or regular arm. Okay? You'll go to the face of the header if it's a top jam, potentially a top jam, whether it be directly to the header or a drop plate, or with the shoe from a regular arm mount, or a parallel arm bracket if you have to attach that to the soffit of the frame. This you don't use. This is just a half sleeve. What's nice about this is, again, you don't have to worry about where the closer is going to be installed, but you have to be mindful that this leg is 1 7/8 inches. That may or may not work with your jam depth, so be mindful of that. And then, of course, this is going to be intended for a 2-inch face. You can get away with a little bit smaller, but not much. So when you're doing half sleeves, be mindful of that. And the typical flat plate also is, a certain dimension. Okay, 1 3/4 inches. This is generally, 14-inch. Now these are provided courtesy of Gulfport Industries. There's an FR273 on this one, and then that one I was showing you is a FR270C FR frame reinforcement. When we switch to the screen view, I'll dive into the Gulfport catalog and take a look at the different reinforcements that they have provided me: the A, the B, and the N. It's probably, well, it's obviously size, and it's certainly going to be thickness is what it is. And the bottom line is, when you're attaching hardware, the hardware has to be attached to the steel door and frame. A typical steel frame, a typical steel door, is of insufficient steel thickness to directly attach to, whether you're just taking self-drilling screws and zipping them in, or you're actually drilling and tapping the holes. That would never work in a 16-gauge frame, at least long-term. For a door closer, you will always want a reinforcement plate. If you're welding these in your shop, you've got to slap them in if there's a closer. There probably is going to be. If you've got doors, and I can't really speak about 20-gauge doors, they do exist, and actually one of the nation's absolute largest retailers has 20-gauge hollow metal doors in their specification for their facilities. That steel is extremely thin. There may not be closer reinforcements in there. If you added that closer to a 20-gauge hollow metal door and you tighten the sex bolts, you're going to crush that skin in pretty quick. You'll deform it pretty quickly. So 18 gauge is typical. Those doors, as far as I know, every common 18 gauge door that you buy from Seco or Curry's or Steelcraft or Mesker, and then everyone else, the plate's going to be in there for a standard installation, whether it be of course regular arm, or it be parallel arm, or it be top jam and the shoe goes to the face of the door. Generally, you have to make sure that your door does come with a closer reinforcement as standard, but your frame, you'll have to call that out. I don't think you would want to assume that your frame will be reinforced, and you certainly don't want to send doors and frames out to the job that are not reinforced. So with no further ado, why don't we switch to the screen view and we'll take a closer look. And what I was saying just earlier is you need to have a reinforcement there, because if there's a problem with the mounting of the hardware, and they used a fastener, like a drywall screw, to install a door closer, but you didn't reinforce the frame, it's really hard to argue that you used a drywall screw to attach a closer. That should make sense. It's not going to work. If you properly reinforce it and they use a drywall screw to attach a closer and it rips out, you did everything you could to make sure that you were doing it within industry published requirements for how you would provide such an item. So closer reinforcements, you're going to want to have them. Use the flat bar in all instances. Now you can just use 2 of these, obviously, if you're not sure, face and then the soffit, but you really don't want to do that because it's extra work and it's obviously extra cost. Let's switch to the screen view and let's take a closer look. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, here we are back in the SDI Glossary closer reinforcement. A metal plate or channel in a door or frame to provide additional strength for the attachment of a door closer, sized and located to accommodate hardware requirements. Yeah, absolutely. SDI goes on to show us the 3 primary mounting types, and we'll just cover those here. And then we had mentioned sleeve. I had said half sleeve. I never see full sleeves, never at all. I wouldn't suggest using those either. They obviously exist. They're in the SDI catalog, but you really need there to be no void in here at all, very little. You're going to press your half sleeve tight up against this, even clamping it if you need to, which you may want to, but after a while you've got your welding glove on and you're holding it down tight in this corner, and you're just tack welding it over in this area, then in this area, you know, on either side. So what you'll notice is in the parallel arm, in the top jamb, and the regular arm, they're always showing the door with 2 plates because they don't know the hand of the door. So you'll have a plate underneath each skin. The parallel arm bracket will be mounted to the soffit. Now, speaking about parallel arm bracket, if you were doing a closer installation on a corner bracket, let's take a look at what a corner bracket is. And I always think of Norton when I think of corner brackets for some reason. I'll just show you what a corner bracket is. You may be unaware of what it is. Get to the manufacturer's page. Then we're going to hop over to our catalog. I'm going to Control F for the word traditional, and that'll get me to the 78 series. These potbelly closers. Corner brackets are really common for potbelly closers. I can't exactly say why, but it could be the origin of potbelly closers was such that parallel arms weren't used. So if you had a door that swung out, you were attaching the corner bracket to the jamb, and you were attaching the closer to the corner bracket and then the shoe to the face of the door. So I don't see any mid-century or earlier potbellies with parallel arm brackets, even though certainly the concept existed. I've seen some old Rixson closers that had a parallel arm bracket. But as I scroll through here, we're about to hit on the corner bracket. Here we go. So this is the deal right here. These will always be what we would probably call or want to do a parallel arm. This is all push side mounting, left-hand reverse doors or right-hand reverse doors, even though in closers we don't call them reverse, we call them left or right. And then brackets also can be incorporated when you're dealing with a non-linear round corner top or a radius corner top. They call it circular door top. The point I'm trying to make is, depending on the bracket, this might be okay to use just the parallel arm style. But if you're using the number 2 bracket, yeah, you're going to need a bracket in the soffit at the header and in the soffit of the jamb itself. So you might need to go one step further at where you are reinforcing for the door closer, because you may not be reinforcing directly for the door closer, but for its mounting bracket. Okay, so that covers parallel arm and a corner bracket as well. We get to the top jamb mount. Assuming that your closer will install onto the face of your frame, or your drop plate will install onto the face of the frame, you'll weld that flat plate right behind here. And then, because that body goes up here and then the arm hangs down here and attaches to the face of the door, that's on a out swinging application generally. A top jamb is always a preferred way to mount a closer. When it comes to the choice between top jamb and parallel arm mount, that is a separate study that we can engage in if you like. Regular arm is going to be for applications where that door is in swinging, but you have to be careful with regular arm in the sense that you could have an application like this where your door needs to swing here, but this dimension inside of here is so small that the door closer body, and you have to be mindful of that because you could be so tight here where it actually doesn't look like that, but it may look more like this or more like this, and you do not have adequate room to get a door here. I've seen where people have pocketed into the drywall a recess to get the door closer body into when the door is at 90 degrees. So regular arm mounts, you have to be mindful of that because you will see that potential, especially in a restaurant application in the bathrooms. There are times when you'll see the closers on the push side parallel arm mounted because they know behind the door they can't fit the door closer body. Like I said, I've never seen a full sleeve. A half sleeve is good when you want to be sure that you're going to get everything reinforced. Now, I mentioned the different part numbers in Gulfport, so let's hop over to their catalog. I've got FR numbers here, and we should be able to pull up, and I very much appreciate them going through the effort of sending me, no charge, many parts that I've used in these videos. Let's see if I can, yeah, FR 273. Half profile closer reinforcement, 14-inch long. Okay, awesome. We also have some FR 270s here, and here we are. So I had noticed earlier that the thickness was certainly something. So the 270A is 16 gauge. You know, I wouldn't be using anything less than 1/8 of an inch. I'm not sure what they use this for, other than maybe people who are looking at the least expensive thing to use. So, you know, 14 by 1 3/4 by 1/8. Yeah, absolutely. What is 10 gauge? 10 gauge is 9/64. 1 divided by 64 times 9. It's 0.140. So the bottom line is 140 is thicker than 1/8 of an inch. So the 10 gauge would be the heaviest one you could use. Really good idea to use that. However, you've got the downside of doing that, however, and an upside of the 16 gauge is, well, actually, 16 gauge on the frame and 16 gauge on the reinforcement, that makes 1/8 of an inch. It really does, because that's a 16 gauge is about a 16th. The downside of your 1/8 inch or 10 gauge is that you're welding it to generally 16 gauge or 14 gauge. So you're welding a very thick piece of material to a relatively thin piece of material, and that could cause you problems with projection in the sense that once you weld it in, imagine this is just the jamb, you now have to grind and sand your welding marks on the outside of the frame. So that could be a downside of using a thicker item. Again, full profile, I mean, I'm really not sure, you know, if you needed to account for doing top jam, parallel arm, and regular arm on the same frame, you could use that. But if it was me, I would use a half sleeve and then a flat plate is what I would do. And there's your half profile, they call it. Reinforcing clip, this is, yeah, you'll see this welded into frames to hold things on, but this is not a conversation about things outside of closer reinforcements. So these were the items that we had shown, well, the half sleeve and then the 4 flat plates. That covers closer reinforcement. The next definition is going to be closer channel. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.